The story of Midian begins not with conflict, but with kinship and movement. After Sarah's death, Abraham took Keturah as his wife, and together they had 6 sons, Midian among them, as recorded in Genesis 25, 1-2. These sons became ancestors of new tribes, their destinies shaped by migration, trade, and intermarriage across the ancient world. Midian's legacy would stretch far beyond northwest Arabia, forming a living corridor of exchange that linked Semitic and African worlds, foreshadowing a people whose story would echo in both history and prophecy. Abraham sent Keturah's sons unto the east country, lands stretching from Canaan's frontier into the Arabian Peninsula, as Genesis 25:6 describes. The Book of Jubilees expands this, noting that Keturah's sons mingled with Ishmael's descendants, becoming known as Arabs who ranged from Paran to Babylon and the Persian Gulf. Their migrations traced ancient trade routes touching the Red Sea corridor and reaching toward northeastern Africa and northern Kush. Traditionally, Midian's territory is placed in northwest Arabia, east of the Gulf of Aqaba. Yet the Midianites were not bound by borders. They traded, migrated, and intermarried with neighboring peoples, including Kushite populations to the south and along the Red Sea. This fluidity of identity explains why, in the biblical narrative, Moses' wife Zipporah is sometimes called both Midianite and Kushite, reflecting the region's cross-continental ties and the blending of African and Semitic lineages. The story of Jethro, Royal, and Hobab, names closely linked to Moses, illustrates the complexity of Midianite genealogy. In Exodus, Moses' father-in-law is called Reuel and Jethro. In Numbers 10:29, he is called Hobab, son of Reuel. Judges 4:11 refers to Hobab as Moses' father-in-law. Scholars have long debated whether these are 3 names for one man, or a lineage of father, son, and brother-in-law. This ambiguity reveals the richness of ancient identity, where names and roles often overlapped. One view holds that Hobab is Jethro's son, making Hobab Moses' brother-in-law and Jethro his father-in-law. This interpretation, based on Numbers 10:29, sees Royal as the patriarch, Jethro as his son, and Hobab as Moses' brother-in-law. The alternative view, supported by Exodus and Judges, is that Jethro, Reuel, and Hobab are alternate names for the same person, Moses' father-in-law. In the ancient world, it was common for individuals to have multiple names or titles, especially across languages and traditions. The confusion is deepened by the Hebrew term for in-law, which can refer to either a father-in-law or another male relative by marriage. This ambiguity, along with the use of multiple names, reflects the richness and complexity of biblical genealogy and the fluidity of identity in the ancient world. Such fluidity allowed for overlapping roles and blended lineages, as seen in the story of Moses and Zipporah. The Book of Jasher recounts Moses' campaign in Cush and his marriage to a Nubian princess, distinct from Zipporah. Yet it is Zipporah, the Midianite, who endures as Moses' wife. Numbers 12:1 calls her a Cushite woman, a testament to the blended identities of the region, where African and Semitic lineages met and mingled. This debate over names and relationships is not just a scholarly puzzle. It highlights how Midianite identity, like Moses' own story, was shaped by movement, intermarriage, and the blending of cultures. The Bible's use of multiple names for the same person is a window into the world of ancient kinship, where identity was layered and dynamic. Ancient texts and genealogies reflect this blending, sometimes calling Zipporah, Moses' wife, a Midianite, and at other times a Cushite. Some traditions see this as evidence of 2 wives, while others see it as a sign of overlapping identities in a world where borders were porous and kinship was complex. The poetic parallel in Habakkuk 3:7, "I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction, the curtains of the land of Midian did tremble," reminds us how closely these peoples were linked, and how Midian's story would become a theological archetype in prophetic memory. Midian's presence along the Red Sea trade corridor made them intermediaries between Africa and Arabia, their caravans and kin weaving together the destinies of both continents. Over generations, Midian's identity became both tribal, rooted in Abrahamic descent, and migratory, shaped by alliances with Moabites, connections to Cush, and the ever-shifting patterns of desert life. Their journey marked the beginning of a people whose legacy would blur the lines between nations. Early biblical narratives show Midianites as traders and nomads, skilled in commerce and mobility, intertwined with Ishmaelites and present among Canaanites. They moved along vital trade routes connecting cultures from Paran to Babylonia, and reinforcing the ties between Africa and Arabia. The Book of Jubilees and other ancient sources note that the sons of Keturah and Ishmael mingled in the east, becoming Arab tribes from Paran to Babylonia. Midianites migrated east and south, forging ties with Cushite territories, explaining why Moses' wife Zipporah, though Midianite, is later called a Cushite woman. This blending of peoples and places is at the heart of the debate about Moses' family and the legacy of Midian. The Kenite connection, descendants of Jethro, formed a living bridge between Israel and Midian, their tents pitched at the crossroads of faith and ancestry. Over time, Midian became part of a larger Arab identity, through migration, intermarriage, and shared desert culture. They were not just a people but a bridge between Africa and Arabia, their story one of movement, adaptation, and the enduring question of identity. In this world, kinship and geography were fluid, and the legacy of Midian would be defined by both connection and difference, a theme that would echo in the lives of Moses, Zipporah, and their descendants. Spiritually, Midian was complex, producing both Balaam the seducer and Jethro the priest. Moses, fleeing Egypt, found refuge, family, and wisdom in Midian, but later, Midian would become a source of seduction, judgment, and war. The paradox of Midian's story is this: it begins with kinship and shared ancestry, but ends in conflict and division, a people in motion, whose legacy would echo through generations, bridging Africa and Arabia. Midian was not a marginal outpost but a crossroads civilization. Its story, and Zipporah's identity as a Cushite Midianite, a window into a world where Africa and Abraham's legacy coexisted. The story of Joseph's sale is more than a family betrayal, it is a window into the world of ancient commerce. As Joseph's brothers dined, a caravan of Ishmaelites approached, their camels laden with spices, balm, and myrrh bound for Egypt. Judah's proposal to sell Joseph was seized upon by Midianite traders, shrewd middlemen who saw opportunity in every transaction. They pulled Joseph from the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, setting in motion a chain of deals that would echo through generations. The biblical text weaves together Midianites and Ishmaelites, blurring the lines between rival traders and partners in profit. Joseph's journey to Egypt was not a simple sale, but a series of exchanges, each merchant driven by the promise of gain, each deal a testament to the power and peril of commerce. In the world of trade, alliances shift as quickly as fortunes. Genesis 39:1 confirms the outcome. Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, bought him from the hand of the Ishmaelites. The Midianites, ever the intermediaries, facilitated the sale, profiting from their position between desperate sellers and eager buyers. Their mercantile spirit was both admired and resented, a force that shaped destinies and sowed the seeds of rivalry. The Midianites' role as middlemen connected civilizations, moving goods, ideas, and people across vast distances. Their caravans were arteries of commerce, but also channels for exploitation, as profit and opportunity often outweighed kinship or compassion. In pursuit of profit, the Midianites sometimes crossed moral boundaries, engaging in the trade of enslaved people and capitalizing on the misfortunes of others. Their pragmatism was legendary, but so too was the shadow it cast. Their caravans, winding through deserts and bustling markets, symbolized the interconnectedness of the ancient world, where every transaction could build bridges or breed resentment. Yet the pursuit of wealth and power through trade was fraught with moral ambiguity. The same hands that brokered peace could also profit from suffering, leaving a legacy both celebrated and condemned. The sale of Joseph set a precedent. Future interactions between Midian and Israel would be marked by both cooperation and exploitation, as commerce bound their destinies together in ways neither could escape. The Midianites' relentless focus on profit often appeared ruthless. For them, business was business. Sentimentality had no place in the cold calculations of gain and loss. Their influence spread far and wide, but so did the seeds of future conflict, sown by their unwavering pursuit of commercial advantage and the rivalries it inspired. Trade brought the Midianites wealth and power, transforming them into a force to be reckoned with. Yet their dominance also bred resentment among those who felt exploited or marginalized. The Midianites' mercantile spirit enriched their society and entangled them with their Israelite kin, forging a relationship that was as tumultuous as it was profitable. Their story is a timeless reminder. Commerce can unite cultures and foster understanding, but it can also divide, exploit, and ignite conflict. The paths of trade are never just about goods, they are about choices, values, and the far-reaching consequences of every deal struck. For Midian, every transaction shaped their destiny, leaving an indelible mark on the tapestry of ancient history, a legacy of both connection and rivalry. Generations after Abraham, Moses was born into a world of shifting empires and ancient promises. Raised in the royal courts of Egypt, he was educated in wisdom and power, yet his heart was troubled by the suffering of his people. According to the book of Jasher, Moses later became a ruler in Cush, governing in Nubia for 40 years, learning the customs, landscapes, and burdens of another nation. Only after fleeing Pharaoh's wrath did he journey into the wilderness, seeking refuge in the land of Midian, far from the centers of power. In the vast and unforgiving wilderness, Moses left behind the splendor of Egypt and the authority of Cush. The desert became his crucible, a place of exile but also of transformation. In Midian he found not only safety but the possibility of a new beginning. By a well, the lifeblood of the arid land, Moses encountered the daughters of Jethro, priest of Midian. When they were threatened by rival shepherds, Moses intervened, his courage shaped by years among diverse peoples. This act of justice and compassion would alter the course of his life, forging a bond with a new family and a new people. Jethro, a man of wisdom and spiritual authority, welcomed Moses into his household. He offered him shelter, work among his flocks, and eventually, the hand of his daughter Zipporah in marriage. Through Jethro's mentorship, Moses learned the rhythms of desert life, the value of humility, and the strength found in kinship. The story deepens with Zipporah. The Bible calls her both Midianite and Cushite, a detail that has sparked centuries of debate. Was Zipporah herself the Cushite woman, or did Moses have two wives? Some traditions see two marriages, others see Zipporah's identity as a reflection of the region's blended heritage, where African and Semitic lineages met and mingled. The first interpretation holds that Moses married two women, Zipporah, the Midianite, and another, an Ethiopian or Cushite woman. This view draws on the plain reading of Numbers 12:1, where Miriam and Aaron speak against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. It suggests a life shaped by multiple alliances and the crossing of cultural boundaries. The second, more widely accepted view, is that Zipporah herself was called a Cushite, perhaps due to her ancestry, her appearance, or the proximity of Midian to Cushite lands. In this reading, the term Cushite becomes a marker of both ethnic blending and geographic reality, highlighting the region's cross-continental ties. The narrative and theological coherence of the story points to Zipporah as both Midianite and Cushite, a matriarch embodying priestly and African heritage. The Bible's emphasis on her role, and on Miriam's punishment for challenging Moses, highlights the dignity and significance of Zipporah's identity. Miriam's punishment, stricken with leprosy and set apart, serves as a powerful symbol. It is a warning against prejudice and a reminder of the value of African identity within the Exodus story. Zipporah stands as a matriarch whose legacy bridges priestly wisdom and African heritage. For 40 years Moses lived as a shepherd, far from privilege yet deeply integrated into Midianite and Cushite society. He learned the rhythms of the desert, the wisdom of kinship, and the strength of humility, guided by Jethro and united with Zipporah. Jethro, recognizing Moses' potential, became his mentor and advisor, sharing his wisdom and guiding him in the ways of leadership. Through this relationship, Moses was shaped into the leader who would one day guide Israel to freedom. Years later after the Exodus, Jethro visited Moses, celebrating his triumphs and offering counsel as Moses struggled with the burdens of leadership. Their bond, forged in exile, endured through triumph and trial. Jethro's advice, to delegate authority and establish judges, became foundational for Israel's governance, ensuring justice and order. His wisdom left a lasting imprint on the nation's future. This era marked a golden age of Israelite-Midianite relations built on kinship, wisdom, and mutual respect. Different cultures learned from each other and coexisted harmoniously, their destinies intertwined by faith and family. A Midianite priest, Jethro, shaped Israel's greatest prophet, influencing Moses' leadership and understanding of God. And a woman of both Midianite and Cushite heritage, Zipporah, became his wife and partner, embodying the unity and complexity of their world. Their alliance showed the potential for peace and partnership between different peoples, demonstrating that cooperation could lead to prosperity and understanding. Yet, as the Bible reminds us, such harmony is always fragile. The peace between Midian and Israel, though real and beneficial, was ultimately fragile, susceptible to the winds of change and the conflicts of human nature. The seeds of future tragedy were sown even in this golden age. Their future, like the shifting sands of the desert, would hold both moments of unity and periods of profound tragedy, testing the strength of their bonds and the resilience of their shared history. The Kenites are among the most ancient peoples of the Near East, named in Genesis 15:19 as inhabitants of Canaan long before Abraham, Midian, or Israel. Though their name echoes Cain, the Kenites were not descendants of Canaan nor of Ham, but a distinct Semitic clan whose presence in the land predates the patriarchs. Their identity was shaped by constant movement, the art of metalwork, and the wisdom of living on the margins. Jethro, also called Reuel and Hobab, was a Midianite priest whose descendants, through alliance and intermarriage, later merged with the Kenites. Over time, the children of Moses' father-in-law became indistinguishable from the Kenites, their tents dotting the edges of settled life. As nomadic blacksmiths, the Kenites forged tools and weapons for many tribes, their skills highly prized, yet their hearts remained free, never fully assimilated, always distinct. The Kenite story is not one of foreign origin but of deep roots in Canaan, an ancient people whose legacy would be shaped by the merging of tribal identities and the forging of new alliances. Through the generations, the Kenites remained a people apart, defined by their mobility, their craft, and their ability to adapt, yet always maintaining a distinct identity within the tapestry of the land. Their story would become intertwined with that of Moses' family, as the descendants of Jethro and Hobab joined the Kenites, blending their destinies and becoming one people in the eyes of history. The Kenites' legacy is that of liminal nomads and master metalworkers, an ancient Canaanite people whose openness to alliance and intermarriage allowed them to endure and adapt, even as the world around them changed. When Moses fled Egypt, he found sanctuary with Jethro, priest of Midian. In time, Jethro's descendants, through Hobab, would join the Kenites, their families merging through alliance and intermarriage. The Kenites journeyed alongside Israel, their tents pitched near the camp but always at the threshold, trusted guides, master craftsmen, and spiritual outsiders. Their liminal existence defined their role, close to the covenant, yet never fully within its bounds. Jethro's wise counsel, urging Moses to delegate authority and appoint judges, became foundational for Israel's governance, and the Kenites' skills and guidance were valued throughout the journey. Over time, the distinction between the Kenites and the descendants of Moses' father-in-law faded, as their families became one people, rooted in Canaan, yet always on the move. The Kenites' tents remained at the edge of settled life, their identity shaped by movement, craft, and the freedom to choose their alliances. Their story is one of adaptation and survival, an ancient people whose openness to new kin allowed them to endure through the ages. After the Exodus, the Kenites moved with Israel into Canaan, settling among the tribe of Judah in the Negev, as Judges 1:16 records. Their reputation as blacksmiths and metalworkers flourished. They forged tools and weapons for neighboring peoples, their skills respected by all. Yet their identity remained hybrid, not wholly Israelite, not entirely Midianite, but a people apart, defined by movement, craft, and the freedom to choose their alliances. Through alliance and intermarriage, the Kenites absorbed the descendants of Moses' father-in-law, further blending their legacy into the fabric of Canaan. Their story is one of movement and adaptation, never fully assimilated yet never isolated, always distinct in their identity and craft. The Kenites' legacy is that of a people who bridged worlds, forging alliances and enduring through the changing tides of history. Through intermarriage and cultural blending, the Kenites left a unique mark on Israel's story. Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite, became a heroine, inviting the Canaanite general Sisera into her tent and striking him down to deliver Israel, as told in Judges 4. The Kenite story is one of alliances and ambiguity, neither fully inside the covenant nor entirely outside the drama of faith. Their actions, not ancestry, defined their legacy. The merging of Moses' kin with the Kenites is reflected in these stories, distinct origins but a shared destiny forged through alliance and choice. The Kenites' proximity to Israel brought both blessing and ambiguity. When Saul waged war against the Amalekites, he warned the Kenites to depart, honoring their kindness to Israel during the Exodus. The Kenites stood as trusted allies in crucial moments yet remained outside the covenant, their tents always at the edge, close, but not within. Their spiritual legacy is one of liminality, a people who chose friendship and cooperation but never full assimilation. In the biblical narrative, the Kenites remind us that identity is shaped as much by choice as by ancestry. Their story is a testament to the enduring power of alliance and adaptation, an ancient people whose openness to new kin allowed them to survive and thrive. The Kenites' legacy is not one of foreign origin, but of deep roots in Canaan, shaped by the merging of identities and the choices that define their place in history. Their tents and forges stood as symbols of a people who bridged worlds, ancient, adaptable, and enduring. Theologically, the Kenites symbolize a third space, partial allegiance choosing peace, skill, and service over enmity. Their story, echoed in the Rishabit's later faithfulness, is a testament to the complexity of identity and the power of choice over bloodline. Some Kenites, like Jael, acted decisively for Israel, others remained on the margins. In the end, the Kenites' alliance stands in contrast to the hostility of other Midianite groups, showing that ethnic identity did not determine covenantal loyalty. Belonging in the biblical world was as much about decision as descent. The Kenite story is a reminder that ancient identities were fluid, shaped by alliance, intermarriage, and the choices that endure beyond bloodlines. Their legacy is that of a people who, through openness and adaptation, became a lasting part of the land's history, distinct, yet forever woven into the story of Canaan and Israel. The Kenites stand as a testament to the enduring power of alliance, adaptation, and the merging of destinies in the ancient world. Their story endures, a branch of peace, rooted in Canaan, flourishing through the choices that shaped their legacy. On the plains of Moab, near Shittim, Israel camped at the edge of promise, unaware that the gravest threat would not come from armies, but from within their own hearts. A spiritual ambush was unfolding, orchestrated by unseen hands. Moabite and Midianite women, following the cunning counsel of Balaam, invited the Israelites to sumptuous feasts and sacrifices to Baal of Peor. The air shimmered with incense, music, and forbidden allure, temptation cloaked in celebration, seduction masked as hospitality. Drawn by desire and curiosity, Israelite men joined the revelry, bowing at pagan altars, eating sacrificial meals, and breaking faith with their God. The covenant was breached not by sword, but by surrender to pleasure and divided loyalty. This was no ordinary battle, but a crisis of the soul, a test of fidelity in the face of subtle seduction. The people's hearts faltered, and the invisible line between kinship and compromise was crossed. The Lord's anger blazed, a deadly plague swept through the camp, striking down thousands. Leaders wept at the entrance of the tabernacle, powerless before the weight of divine judgment and the consequences of spiritual betrayal. In the midst of this crisis, an Israelite man brazenly brought a Midianite woman into his family's tent, in full view of Moses and the assembly, a final act of defiance, as if the covenant itself could be flaunted. Phinehas, grandson of Aaron, seized a spear. With holy zeal he entered the tent and struck down both the man and the woman, an act of righteous fury that halted the plague and restored the boundary of the covenant. The plague ceased, but not before 24,000 had perished. The camp was left in shock, grieving, chastened, and forever changed by the cost of compromise. The incident at Baal Peor became a warning for generations, a lesson that the most dangerous enemies are not always external, but the seduction of divided loyalties and the slow erosion of faith. The Midianites, once kin and allies, were now seen as corruptors, agents of spiritual ruin whose friendship ended in disaster. The stage was set for retribution, and the memory of Baal Peor would echo as a solemn warning through Israel's history. In the aftermath, a sense of loss lingered, a friendship betrayed, a covenant tested, and a people forever marked by the high cost of spiritual infidelity. The story of Baal Peor stands as a lasting warning, that the greatest threats to faith often arise from within, and that the choices made in moments of temptation can shape destinies for generations. After the seduction at Baal Peor, where Midianite women under Balaam's counsel enticed Israel into idolatry, the Lord issued a grave command to Moses: avenge the children of Israel on the Midianites. This was not a war for land or vengeance, but a ritual act of judgment, a response to a spiritual breach that struck at the heart of the covenant. The kinship that once united Israel and Midian was now shattered by betrayal and idolatry, exposing the peril of closeness without loyalty. Moses gathered 12,000 warriors, 1,000 from each tribe, and placed Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, at their head. Phinehas carried the sacred trumpets and holy vessels, marking the campaign as a sacred ordeal, not a conquest of ambition. The Israelites struck swiftly. The 5 kings of Midian, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, fell by the sword, along with Balaam, whose counsel had brought disaster upon Israel. The battle was decisive, its purpose judicial and purifying, yet when the soldiers returned, Moses was angered. They had spared the Midianite women and children, those who had been instruments of seduction and judgment. Moses commanded that all male children and every woman who had known a man be put to death. Only the young girls were spared. The plunder, flocks, herds, gold, was divided, and a tribute set apart for the Lord. The camp underwent ritual purification, every soldier and object cleansed before rejoining the community. The ethical weight of this command, especially the judgment on women and children, has troubled generations. Yet, in the biblical narrative, the war is framed as God's justice for covenantal violation, not human aggression. Balaam, once a prophet, met his end among the enemies of Israel, a warning against using spiritual gifts for corruption. Phinehas's priestly zeal, once shown in the camp, now extended to the battlefield, marking the boundary between sanctuary and judgment. In the end, Midian, once a place of refuge and kinship for Moses, became a symbol of corruption and divine wrath. The story of the war against Midian is a stark reminder. Proximity to the covenant brings both opportunity and peril. The Kenites who chose faithfulness survived. Balaam and the seducing women who chose hostility perished. The legacy of Midian is thus a warning about the cost of betrayal, the gravity of judgment, and the enduring question of what it means to belong. The aftermath, ritual cleansing, the division of spoils, and the memory of kinship lost, echoes through the ages, challenging us to consider the price of allegiance and the consequences of turning away. Theologically, the war with Midian stands as a troubling but essential chapter in the biblical narrative. It reveals the complexity of divine justice, the dangers of spiritual compromise, and the limits of kinship without shared faith. The fate of Midian and the survival of the Kenites remind us that belonging is defined not by blood alone, but by the choices we make and the allegiances we keep. The legacy of this necessary conflict endures, a warning about the cost of betrayal, the weight of judgment, and the enduring question of what it means to be part of a covenant people. In the shadow of Midian's fall, the story presses us to ask, what does it mean to belong and what is the price of turning away? For 7 years, the Midianites, Amalekites, and peoples of the east swept across Israel like a relentless plague of locusts. They ravaged the land, devouring crops, stealing livestock, and leaving nothing but hunger and fear in their wake. The Israelites, once proud and free, were driven to hide in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds, their spirits broken. In their desperation, they cried out to God, not for vengeance but for deliverance from a darkness that seemed unending. The land itself bore the scars of oppression. Fields stripped bare, villages abandoned, and hope nearly extinguished. Yet in the silence of suffering, a new chapter was about to begin. In the midst of this darkness, a man named Gideon threshed wheat in secret, hiding in a wine press to escape the Midianite raiders. He was not a warrior but a reluctant farmer, fearful and uncertain. Suddenly the angel of the Lord appeared before him, declaring, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon, bewildered and doubtful, questioned how deliverance could come through someone so ordinary. He asked for a sign, first fire springing from a rock to consume his offering, then the famous test of the fleece. Wet with dew one night, dry the next. Each sign was a divine assurance that God's strength would be revealed through human weakness. Strengthened by these signs, Gideon summoned the tribes of Israel. 32,000 men answered the call, but God declared, "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast." First all who were fearful were sent home. 22,000 departed, leaving only 10,000. Then, at the water's edge, God tested them again. Only those who lapped water with their hands to their mouths were chosen. In the end, just 300 remained, armed not with swords but with trumpets, empty jars, and blazing torches. The odds were impossible, but that was the point. Victory would belong to God alone. As night fell, Gideon divided his 300 men into companies, placing a trumpet and a torch concealed in a jar into each man's hand. The Midianite camp sprawled across the valley below, countless tents flickering in the darkness. At Gideon's signal, the men shattered their jars, raised their torches high, and blasted their trumpets. The cry rang out, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" In that moment, chaos erupted in the enemy camp. Panic swept through the Midianites and their allies. In the confusion and terror, they turned their swords on one another, unable to distinguish friend from foe. Leaders like Oreb and Zeb were cut down at the rock and the winepress that would bear their names. Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian, fled into the night, but Gideon and his men pursued them relentlessly, capturing them and bringing an end to the threat. The supernatural victory was total, won not by might, but by faith, and obedience. The Lord had delivered Israel with a handful of men, so that all would know the triumph belonged to him. In the aftermath, Gideon destroyed the altar of Baal, restoring the worship of Yahweh to the land. Israel, once crushed by fear, was delivered by the hand of God working through unlikely means. The land had rest for 40 years, a generation shaped by the memory of deliverance and the lesson that God's strength is made perfect in weakness. The story of Gideon is more than a tale of military victory. It is a testament to the power of faith, to judgment turned to deliverance, and to the restoration of covenant faith. Midian, once kin to Israel, now fell as a symbol of broken alliance, echoing the journey of Moses but ending in final separation. In the end, the victory over Midian was not just a triumph of arms, but a miracle of trust, a reminder that God can save against all odds, and that deliverance often comes through the most unexpected vessels. The legacy of Gideon's deliverance endures, a story of hope, faith, and the enduring truth that strength is found not in numbers, but in obedience to the divine call. Among the descendants of the Kenites, a people forever linked to Midian through Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, emerged the Rechabites, a clan renowned for their unwavering obedience. Unlike many who settled and assimilated, the Rechabites chose a life apart, preserving the purity and simplicity of their ancestors. Their story stands as a living testament to faithfulness within the Midianite Kenite lineage, a beacon of integrity amid a world drawn to excess. The Rechabites traced their ancestry to Jonadab, son of Rechab, a Kenite leader who commanded his family to reject the comforts of settled life. No houses, no vineyards, no fields. Instead, they dwelled in tents, wandering the open lands, choosing the freedom of the desert over the temptations of city and vineyard. Their obedience was not mere tradition, but a conscious protest against the corruption and compromise of urban society. For generations, the Rechabites kept Jonadab's charge. You shall drink no wine, neither you nor your sons forever. You shall not build a house, nor sow seed, nor plant a vineyard, but you shall dwell in tents all your days. Their lives became a living rebuke to the world's excess, a quiet witness to the power of tradition and the strength of self-denial. No wine, no houses, only tents and the open sky, a perpetual witness to their ancestors' covenant. Their obedience set them apart, marking them as guardians of purity and simplicity amid a world drawn to excess. Through the centuries, the Rechabites remained nomads, faithful to their calling even as the world around them settled and forgot. Their tents dotted the landscape, a quiet rebuke to the settled cities and a reminder of Israel's own wandering past. Their faithfulness became a lesson for all Israel, a living parable of covenant loyalty and the power of tradition. In the days of Jeremiah, God called the prophet to bring the Rechabites into the temple and set wine before them, a test of their resolve. Jeremiah offered them wine, but they refused, saying, "We will drink no wine, for Jonadab, son of Rechab, our ancestor, commanded us so." Their steadfastness honored their ancestors' command, even in the sacred courts of the temple. God praised their obedience, declaring through Jeremiah that Jonadab's line would always stand before him, a perpetual witness to faithfulness. The Lord promised that the descendants of Jonadab, son of Rechab, would never lack a man to stand before him, a generational blessing for their loyalty. The Rechabites' loyalty to tradition shamed the disobedience of Judah, exposing the nation's failure to heed God's voice. Their story stands as a rebuke and a hope, a reminder that faithfulness is possible, even when the world turns away. The Rechabites are a surprising epilogue to the Midianite story, a redemptive counterpoint to the betrayals of Baal Peor and the violence of Gideon's day. Through the Kenite line, Midian's legacy included models of faith and integrity, proof that even those linked to troubled histories could choose holiness and be honored by God. The Kenite Rechabite tradition proved that faithfulness could flourish in unexpected places, far from the centers of power. Their obedience, not their ancestry, defined their legacy, a legacy of simplicity, holiness, and enduring blessing. In the end, it was not bloodline but the choice to obey that set the Rechabites apart as a faithful remnant. Their story endures, a living witness that faithfulness, even in the margins, is precious in God's sight. The story of Midian's legacy is illuminated by the Rechabites, but to truly understand Midian's enduring influence, we must look beyond its spiritual heritage to its place in the geography and history of the Red Sea world. Midian's broader story is inseparable from its neighbors and the landscapes that shaped its destiny. The Red Sea, far from being a barrier, was a vibrant corridor connecting Africa and Arabia. To appreciate Midian's reach, we must compare it to another ancient power along these waters, the Kingdom of Aksum, which would rise centuries later on the African side of the Red Sea. Like Midian, Aksum became a crossroads of trade, culture, and faith, its influence stretching across continents. Both Midian and Aksum emerged as pivotal civilizations along the Red Sea corridor, shaping the flow of goods, people, and ideas between Africa and Arabia. This region, where Africa and Arabia meet, became a melting pot of cultures and a highway for exchange. Across these waters, ships carried not only goods but beliefs and traditions, weaving together the destinies of distant peoples. Midian's heartland lay east of the Gulf of Aqaba, anchoring the Arabian side of the corridor. Yet its sphere extended westward, across the Red Sea into northern Africa, as ancient sources and archaeological finds reveal. Archaeological discoveries confirm that Midianite influence reached far beyond Arabia, linking it to African lands. Centuries later, Aksum would rise in what is now Ethiopia and Eritrea, commanding the southwestern Red Sea and its highlands. From its heights, Aksum projected power deep into Arabia, mirroring the reach of Midian in earlier times. Both civilizations shaped the Red Sea world, their influence radiating across the water and into the heart of the ancient Near East. These were not isolated kingdoms, but dynamic societies whose ports and trade routes connected Egypt, Arabia, and East Africa. Midian's ancient harbors, possibly at Elath or Lutkom, buzzed with activity, just as Aksum's famed port of Adulis would centuries later. These ports became gateways for merchants, pilgrims, and envoys, fostering a cosmopolitan world. Adulis on the African coast rivaled the Arabian harbors in scale and significance. Markets in both realms bustled with traders from across the known world. Frankincense, gold, spices, and luxury goods flowed through their hands, enriching both Midian and Aksum. These goods linked Egypt, Arabia, East Africa, and even distant India, making the Red Sea a true corridor of civilization. Ancient maps and trade routes reveal the interconnectedness of these worlds, with Midian and Aksum as vital nodes. Both civilizations became intermediaries, bridging the African interior with the broader world. Caravans and ships carried not only goods, but also stories, customs, and beliefs, fostering cultural exchange. The Red Sea corridor became a place where identities blended and new traditions emerged. Religiously, both lands became crossroads, Midian with its priestly traditions and ties to Moses and Jethro, Aksum later as a beacon of Christianity. Midian stood at the intersection of early Yahwism and broader Semitic beliefs, while Aksum would bridge Africa and Arabia through faith. Both civilizations show how spiritual innovation followed in the wake of trade and migration. Aksum's embrace of Christianity echoes Midian's earlier role as a bridge between peoples and faiths. In both realms, the Red Sea was not a dividing line, but a channel for spiritual and cultural transformation. This comparison is more than academic, it helps resolve the debate over Midian's identity. Was it African or Arabian? The answer is both. Like Aksum, Midian was a trans-Red Sea civilization, rooted in Arabia but always looking west across the water. Its alliances, marriages, and traditions spanned continents, making it a bridge, not a barrier, between worlds. Understanding Midian alongside Aksum reveals the Red Sea as a corridor of connection, not a wall of separation. Both civilizations remind us that identity in the ancient world was fluid, shaped as much by exchange as by ancestry. This insight reframes Midian's story, not as a tale of isolation but of connection, influence, and enduring legacy across two continents. As we approach the end of Midian's story, this perspective prepares us to see its lessons not as distant relics, but as living echoes. The bridges built by Midian and Aksum remind us that the world we inherit is shaped by the connections we forge across boundaries. In the end, Midian's legacy is that of an Abrahamic bridge, a civilization whose story unites Africa and Arabia, faith and kinship, in the tapestry of the ancient world. The Red Sea corridor stands as a testament to the power of movement, exchange, and the enduring search for belonging. The story of Midian and Aksum is a reminder that the boundaries of the past were always more fluid than we imagine, and that bridges, not barriers, define the legacy of civilizations. As we move forward, let us remember the lessons of these ancient bridges across the Red Sea. Midian's story became more than history. It became a song, etched in the memory of Israel and echoed in the words of prophets and musicians. In the temple courts, Asaph, chief musician and seer, lifted his voice in psalms that turned memory into melody and defeat into hope. In Psalm 83, Asaph's plea rises, "O God, do not keep silence. Do to them as you did to Midian, as to Sisera and Jabin at the river Kishon." The memory of Midian's defeat becomes a template for deliverance, a poetic invocation of God's power to overturn oppression. Asaph's words recall the day of Midian, when chains of bondage were shattered, not by might, but by divine orchestration. The very name Midian became a refrain in Israel's songs of deliverance. Deborah's song, too, remembers, "The river Kishon swept them away, the ancient river, the river Kishon." Her victory hymn, like Asaph's, weaves Midian's defeat into a melody of hope, reminding Israel that survival is a gift of God's hand. These songs, sung by seers and prophets, became Israel's shield. They taught that deliverance is not won by strength but by trust in the one who writes history in melody and mercy. Isaiah declared, as in the day of Midian, God would shatter the yoke of oppression and lift the rod from his people. The memory of Midian's fall became a beacon for all generations. Gideon's victory became a living parable, proof that God can save against all odds, turning weakness into strength and despair into song. In Habakkuk's vision, the tents of Midian trembled, a sign that divine justice would sweep through the nations, and that every song of deliverance is also a warning. Midian's legacy is dual: kinship and conflict, blessing and betrayal. The story is woven from the threads of family ties and the wounds of broken trust. The Kenites and Rechabites chose faithfulness, joining the covenant and becoming a living bridge. Others, Balaam, Cosbi, the Midianite kings, chose enmity and strife, and their names became warnings sung in Israel's laments. The lesson endures. Legacy is shaped by choices, not just by blood. Faith, loyalty, and obedience define destiny, more than ancestry or origin. Kinship sets the stage, but character writes the ending. The songs of Asaph and Deborah remind us, what we choose matters most, and every generation must decide its own melody of faith. In every generation, the story of Midian stands as a mirror, a warning, a hope, and a call to remember that divine reversal is always possible. In the end, Midian is not just a place or a people, but a melody, an archetype sung in the courts of faith, reminding us that deliverance, justice, and legacy are written by the choices we make. Midian began as kin, but ended as a song, a melody of mercy through judgment, echoing in every psalm and every heart that seeks hope beyond despair. As the story of Midian closes, a final warning echoes from Scripture. Balaam, unable to curse Israel, taught compromise, seducing God's people into idolatry and immorality at Baal Peor. Centuries later, Jesus warns the church in Revelation, "You have some who hold the teaching of Balaam, so also you have some who hold the teaching of the Nicolaitans." The danger is not just from outside but from within, when faith is diluted by compromise and loyalty to God is traded for comfort or acceptance. The legacy of Balaam and the Nicolaitans is a call to vigilance, to resist spiritual lukewarmness, to reject alliance with the world, and to remain faithful, even when compromise seems easy. Let the story of Midian, Balaam, and the Nicolaitans be a living warning, so that every generation may choose faithfulness over convenience and covenant over compromise.